Hello everyone, welcome to IMPRINT IS, and today we are looking at the Indian Express and the Hindu Daily News Discovery for the day, that is 29th November, and I'm Varun Khodar. So, what all topics are we covering today? We're looking at an editorial by Ashwini Kumar, who was a former law minister. He is talking about the Supreme Court being a bench of beacon for the rest of society. Then, obviously, there's a Brexit warning that the growth rate and the GDP of UK will decline by as much as 8% in case there's a hard exit, or even if there's a soft one that is done by Theresa May. There are different data they've given. Then there's a back series which have been released by the Niti Aayog. For the first time ever, a political organization such as Niti Aayog has done so, because normally it is the NSSO, the CSO, etc., who normally release such series. And obviously there's a debate on that. What basically it shows is that that the NDA is growing faster than the UPA 1 and UPA 2, which sounds like a joke. But anyhow, then we have oil swings and the economy, right? We look into that. There's a FAQ on the Oped page in page 11. Then we have heat waves. This is going to be a major focus topic today. We're going to try to cover all aspects of heat wave. Right, I've already put the NDMA guidelines PDF on our group. Please go through that as well and write an answer on the heat waves and the NDMA guidelines on heat waves, definitely. Then we have RBI related editorial on the Hindu page, right? We'll talk about that. Then Indigenous tribe articles on Oped Page and other pages of the Hindu. Then a couple of miscellaneous articles. There's an article also on maternity benefit on page 10 of the Hindu. Then there is an article on class caste politics in MP at Chhattisgarh, etc. Right. So let's start. Right. So we start with GS2, that is polity, governance, and IR related issues. And as I said, we'll start with Ashwini Kumar. So what does Ashwini Kumar says? Right. He says now is more than ever, Supreme Court will need to be the moral compass for the country. Now the question is, why does he say that? And that's the question he answers in this article. So he says these are difficult times because the center has ceased to hold, right? Our politics now tends towards extremes. So he's saying the reason why I'm saying the Supreme Court has to become the moral compass is because our politics is now going towards the extremes, and only through the Supreme Court this can happen. So what is happening is the line between the decisive and authoritarian exercise of power are now being blurred. So there's a difference between decisive and authoritarian, and now that line is actually being blurred. And obviously the blurring is rooted in the negation of the political morality, which demands that power be tempered with constitutional bounds. And so this is no longer happening, according to him. Right, and obviously liberal institutions of liberal democracy are at siege. Take CBI, take RBI, take any other organization, they're at siege. Right, so we face a widely held perception of judicial overreach also, and unsettling of constitutional ordained dispersal of power between the three organs of the state, and major issues which are impacting the quality, right, of life of the people and the nation's future are being left to the brethren ropes. Why? Because obviously it's not politically, correct or politically acceptable to any political party to take such hard decisions, and that's why they're basically giving it to the court. So, take for the first one is the Sabrimala case, and in the Sabrimala case, what's happening is that there's a different profound question right now that whether judicial power should be used in such a region, whether judiciary can actually focus or make such a rule, because it's a tradition of our society. Now obviously the question is whether the court should or should not do, but the court has done. So the court's expansive exercise and of judicial power has been accepted by the nation as well in this case, primarily because of its stellar contribution towards the broadening of human rights by leaning on the dignitarian impulse of the constitution, and obviously invoking the doctrine of progressive realization of rights. So that is what that progressively, if you look at Article 21 of the Constitution, right, the right to life with dignity, the continuously it has been expanded to include other rights, right to a good good living environment, right to breathe, right to sleep, etc., etc. right? So that is the case. And now obviously there have been profound scholarship also there. Why? Because if you look into the judgments of human dignity in the cases, that is Navtesh Johar, that is the LGBT case, Nambi Narayan, Puttaswamy has right to privacy, and M Nagraj, right? In case you haven't gone through these cases today, right, please get some, take some time and open these cases on Google and have a look, right, on Wikipedia. Right, we'll try to do another series of cases which are important in Supreme Court, right? Cases. So, but anyhow, that's for later. We can't do it today. Definitely in this series. Okay, so basically, but there's a problem also that there has been ambivalence on the part of court in addressing issues of legality of government order deporting Rohingyas who have sought refuge in India. And this is despite a formidable argument in favor of Rohingyas, right? So what is happening is, Pratap Bhanu Mehta very interesting says is this quote. He says the logic of what the court will subject to scrutiny and what it will pass is mysterious, right? As God propensity to inflict suffering. So what is happening is that in some ways, in Navtesh Johar and Puttaswamy and M Nagraj, they're intervening, right? On the other hand, in other cases, they're not. Like, take for example the arrest of 5 activists, right? Right, and denying the setting up of SIT for fair investigation, right? And by 2-1 judgment this happened. So obviously this is D.Y. Chandrachud, who was the dissenting judge, suggested a soulful requiem to liberty in the absence of fair criminal investigation. That how can you expect the Maharashtra police to who's actually BJP ruled to actually create a fair investigation, right? Because police is notorious in India for being a tool of the political parties. Now, in the end, he talks about that we are witnessing a time when assaults on human dignity and its accompanying values of liberalism, inclusion, and equality present a grave challenge to the idea of India that venerates a rule of law, plurality, and democracy. Hence, basically, the apex court, as the guardian of a core value of a public, is expected to be consistent in its pronouncements to advance equity, equality, democracy, and humanitarian morality enshrined in the National Charter. So that is what he's saying. That it is now on the court itself, right? Basically, then he says is that now definitely the Supreme Court needs to be a light onto the nations in the end of the article. So definitely, I think this is a very, very important article. And see, any case which has been mentioned in here, right, you should actually type on Wikipedia and go through that case. What is that case? But obviously, we'll try to do another series, as I said, on Supreme Court cases, right? Because all of them, anyhow, if we start covering it right now, it will basically take too much time. Okay, so let's look at BREXIT. That's the next one. We've already gone through the BREXIT, but what this article says is that Britain will be worse off economically under the withdrawal deal between the UK and the EU at the weekend if Britain remains in the Union. There's a model analysis which has been done, and it says that even with the Prime Minister's deal, right, it would be worse off, up to 3.9 worse off when free movement of people and end entirely. So basically, this free movement of people actually is the real concern, right? So that is the basic issue, and this is a report, right, which says is that this remains significantly better if Britain crashed out of the EU with no deal or left with an average free trade, which would see a hit up of 10.7 to 8%. So again, if there is no deal, what will happen is there's 10.7 on 8.1%. The GDP will come down by that number, right? So obviously, now obviously this is a huge issue, and I think we'll get a more clear idea on this. But obviously, if you think about that, this is deglobalization in some ways, right? And obviously, this is the trade war which has now started all across the world. Okay, so but for getting a context, I think we should do another series, but I think it's still not clear what will happen. So it's best that you just look at it. Okay, yeah, this will happen, but not really go into too much detail for now. Then GS3, economics, science and technology, disaster management, international security issue. That's it, right? So we have the most interesting thing that has happened today, right? So suddenly, India never hit the 9% high growth phase in the years of UPA 1 and UC 2 as earlier believed, according to the new back series data released by the government, right? And what has happened is the data shows that India recovery from the global financial crisis took longer than previously thought, and the government in 2015 had changed the gross value added methodology from the earlier GDP and brought the base year computation to 2011 from 2004-5. And obviously, the back series provides growth estimates for the previous years using new methodology, right? And it basically says that growth rate during the UPA 1 and UPA 2 averaged 6.7%. I don't know how can they manage that, but okay, they have. Uh, the old series peg these growth rate at 8.1 and 7.46%, right? And in comparison, we have average growth rate of 7.35%, and this seems to be the joke of the year. Okay, but I think this is the Modi government. They love to play with statistics, and they have destroyed every institution that exists, and they have destroyed this one as well. So, but anyhow, let's for the time being agree to the fact that this is true because it is the government which is saying so. Okay, let's look at the other article, right? So it's again the same thing. The India's GDP growth never crossed into a high growth phase of 9% the last decade or more. And the new back series data from 2004-5 released by the government shows this, right? And the same thing. This is what the chief statistician said, that it basically the major takeaway: the economy doesn't seem have to recover from the global financial crisis as quickly as previously thought, right? And there was a general point about the manner in which old computation, which was generally insensitive to current data. Okay, but obviously there is other issues. He's mentioned the fact that other issues with it. So the other element is that the behavior of the mining sector, which not only affects the mining but also a trade segment, right? And obviously there's a decoupling, and there is a collapse in the mining sector, which more or less has happened post the financial crisis. And we do not see any of the data since 3 or 4 years later. And he's giving that reason, that is the reason why this is. And the new data shows that manufacturing growth plummeted to 4.7% in 2008-9 and then grew at 11% in 9-10. However, the growth slowed to 3.1% within 2 years and remained below 6% in 2014-15. Right? The mining sector, again, recovered from the contraction seen in 8-9 for a couple of years and then plummeted again from a contraction of 17.5% and did not even cross 1% growth in 2014. But that, I think, is more related to the Supreme Court, not allowing mining in those periods of time due to environmental issues and other corruption cases. Okay. Now, Pranab Sen, who is the previous chief statistician, he says the current methodology is robust to the extent that instead of doing this as a purely arithmetic exercise, they try to relate the estimates to observe indicators. And they have used the annual survey of industries data for manufacturing, the sales data for trade, and so on. And Mr. Sen also pointed out in the manner in which data has been released, which dented the credibility of both the methodology and the CSO, right? And he says my concerns come out that this back series was essentially released by Niti Aayog, which is a political institution, and this has never happened. And when a political institution releases, national statistical data, it puts a huge question mark on the credibility of data and the political independence of statistical agencies. And the credibility of CSO has been badly dented, not because of data, but because of the manner of the release which it has been done. What he says is that the statistical methods on the face of it are fine. The point is, it is almost impossible to replicate what I've done, right? They will tell you which method they have used for which sector, but there are several different methods you can use. So the question is, what were the results given by the other methods, and why did they apply a specific method to this sector? So obviously, we have this concept of voodoo economics, and Mr. Jaitley and Narendra Modi are doing it for the last 4 years. And we have demonetization, we're still growing. We have GST, we are still growing. Somehow it's some kind of magic which is happening, which is not seen, at the ground level, but it's seen everywhere else, right? But the idea being that, it's all fine for Mr. Narendra Modi to say that India is growing at a high growth rate right now. But to say that UPI 1 and 2 we are not growing, kind of basically is, it seems as if it's just for 2019 elections. That's a problem, I would say, because if you keep on doing this, people will just stop looking at this data in some ways. Okay, then we have oil swings and the economy. Okay, so first question, beautiful question. What factors influence crude oil prices? So obviously very straightforward. So obviously number one is global demand for oil, right? By major producing nations to raise and cut supplies, and the global, political environment are the key to oil prices. Okay, so why are oil prices? The next question, very important for us. So obviously, if you think about it, in June 2008, we had oil prices above $160 per barrel. And now in January 2016, we had 35. After breaching, right, $85 per barrel in early October, they have plunged to 8% to reach the lowest low in less than a year. And they have since recovered to about $60. And why this has been done? Two factors I've said. So first is obviously higher supply and volatility due to the uncertainty about the global economy and the fear, obviously, of a full-fledged trade war, right, between USA and China have rattled speculators. But however, oil is estimated to, obviously regain some of the lost grounds and stabilize above $75 per year by S&P. That's what the S&P is saying. And obviously, key support prices for oil prices would have been the anticipated production cuts, as well as against Iran sanctions, against, obviously, where, obviously what happened was everybody thought it would be Iran sanctions, and that's why the oil was going up. But, USA gave a waiver to nearly every country who was importing from Iran, so that really didn't create a problem for us. Right. So OPEC obviously is expected to cut production of a meeting on 6th December, and obviously this might lead to some kind of issue. Right now, obviously we have non-OPEC output at 2.3 million barrels per day, and obviously this demand was expected to grow. But okay, then the next question, which is beautifully given, is what is the Indian basket of crude? So it is the weighted average of Dubai and Oman sour and Brent oil sweet. Okay, so there are different types of oil. There's, obviously there's Texas intermediate, there's Dubai and Oman, so there's Brent sweet crude, right? So obviously it depends on the quality of sulfur, depending on whether you call it sweet or sour, right? And it is the indicator of price for crude imports for India, and the index has bearing on price rise in India in general, right? And on an average, it's been $70 and it's reached to 80 in October. So now the question is, how does a crude oil price affect the rupee? So remember, India imports more than 80% of its crude oil requirement, and it has to pay for these imports in foreign currency, mainly dollars. And obviously, if Indian international crude price rise, we need more dollars, and if there's more volatility and uncertainty in which the prices will say, you tend to buy more oil and stock up. And as more rupees are exchanged for dollars in this exercise, it generates a demand for dollar and it weakens the rupee. So there is a relation between the price of dollar and the price of a rupee exchange rate. Okay, how do fuel prices influence inflation? Obviously, if you think about it, it's the cost of transportation in very simple terms. Apples from Himachal are eaten in Kerala, for instance. Rise in fuel costs are passed by the truck fleet owners to the consumers. Accelerating inflation influences the central bank to raise rates and make costlier to borrow. Obviously, it will increase the repo, and higher interest rate keep the supply of money in check and helps control inflation as well. So, beautiful article. I think you should cut it and put it in your news, and also write an answer in this. Okay. Then we have, I think, the most important article. I think this is something in GS3 which can come in the exam. So Lancet gives a response to heatwave exposure search. So it says that Indians faced almost 60 million heatwave exposure events in 2016. Okay, so it says from 2014 to 17, the average length of heat waves in India ranged from 3 to 4 days, compared to a global average of 0.8 to 1.8 days. And Indians were exposed to almost 60 million heat wave exposure events in 2016, and a jump of 40 million from 2012. So basically, this can be seen to be climate change. Now, heat waves are associated with increased rates of heat stress, heat stroke, worsening heart failure, acute kidney injury from dehydration. Then children, the elderly, obviously with pre-existing morbidities, are particularly vulnerable, right? School children especially. right? On a total of 153 billion hours of labor were lost in 2017 due to heat, and an increase of $62 billion from the year 2000. So obviously, this is a big issue, right? So what should happen is that we should, recent report said that we should actually identify heat spots through appropriate tracking of meteorological data and promote timely development and implementation of local action heat plans with strategic intercoordination, right? And obviously a response which targets the most vulnerable to these heat waves, right? So they have actually talked about, so what other sectors? So they said that the agriculture sector obviously is most vulnerable, and farm labor is obviously the most vulnerable to this heat wave, right? In comparison to other sectors. And remember, India, it accounts for nearly 59% of our employment. So therefore, this is definitely something we should really look into. Okay, just to revise, what is the heat wave? Heat wave is an abnormally high temperature, more than the normal, right? The extreme temperature and resultant atmospheric condition adversely affect people living in these conditions and causes psychological stress and sometimes even results in death, right? Heat waves is only declared when for 2 consecutive days the maximum temperature rises above 40 degree and at least 4.5 degree above normal, and when the maximum temperature exceeds 45 degree for over 2 years. So this is, but obviously in hilly regions it would be different. So temperature is above 30 and a departure of 4.5, this is seen to be a heat wave. And a severe heat wave is said to prevail for 2 consecutive days, right? The maximum temperature exceeds 40 degrees centigrade and departure is above 6.5. And obviously, it can also be declared if the temperature goes beyond 47 degrees Celsius. Okay, so this is the diagram. This is something which I think you should all make, right? That what areas that heat waves can be there, and they've actually shown in April this year. This heat wave actually touched all across. There was an average increase of 8 to 4 degrees in Ganganagar. There was 8.5 degree above normal temperature. Right? Jammu was also hotter, and so on. So this would actually really help you out in case you get, you'll get extra marks if you can draw this diagram. Right. So practice this diagram, right, a couple of times before you actually, because then only you can draw it. Otherwise, you'll not be able to draw it. So obviously, Nagpur, Gwalior, Allahabad, Gulbarga, Bikaner, Jaipur, etc. All of them were above the mean temperature, right, in March. That is right. And obviously, 1st of April was very, very. So this is on 19th of April that they've basically drawn this. Just for revision, this is from the NDMA guideline. So what does the NDMA say? So NDMA say heat wave is a condition of atmospheric temperature that leads to psychological stress, which can sometimes claim human life. And heat wave is defined as a condition in maximum temperature at a grid point is 3 degree or more than normal temperature consecutively for 3 days. So they have a different time, right? And World Meteorological Organization defines heat wave as 5 or more consecutive days during which the daily maximum temperature exceeds the average temperature by 5 degrees. And if the maximum temperature at any place continues to be 45 degrees for 2 days, it's called a heat wave condition, right? And heat waves have happened in India, in Orissa, in Ahmedabad. In Orissa, in 1998, more than 2,000 people died under heat wave. Ahmedabad was among the first city to prevail, make a heat wave plan in 2015, and it provides a framework for other cities to emulate and help their citizens. And obviously, this heat wave action plan of Ahmedabad concluded that smart cities are heat wave safe cities. So what have they done? They have recognized heat wave as a major health risk. They map out the high risk communities. They set up a public, cooling places have been set up, and obviously they issue heat wave alerts through different media. Then what are the symptoms? Sometimes what happens? They even will ask you. The first hit in 2009, I remember there was a question: is that there's a person who's got a stroke, right? So what will you do, right? So they have actually given the answer here, right? So a heat stroke is a severe medical, emergency. Call 108 or 102 for ambulance, right? Then take the victim to the hospital. Delay can be fatal, and for the time being, you can move him to a cooler environment. Try a cool bath or sponging to reduce body temperature, right? Use extreme caution, use fans or air condition, but do not give fluids. Okay, this is very, very important. right? So if there's a heat exhaustion, there's some kind of weak pulse, normal temperature, fainting or vomiting. So get the victim to lie in a cool place, loosen clothing, apply cool wet cloth, fan or move victim to a air conditioned place. Give sips of water slowly, and if nausea occurs, discontinue, right? And obviously vomiting occurs, seek immediate medical attention. So again, this is important. Then heat cramps, move to cool or shaded place, apply firm pressure on cramping of muscles, right? And obviously give sips of water. So water, if you have cramps, definitely should have water, and that normally happens. If you have a sunburn, obviously take a shower, use soap to remove oils that may block pores from entering the body from cooling naturally. Blisters occur, obviously applies, sterile dressing and get medical attention, right? So they've all mentioned the symptoms here. So sunburn, redness, pain, swelling, etc. is definitely there. Then what to do's and don'ts? So obviously heat wave can result in psychological, physiological strain, right? And which could even result in death. So minimize the impact. What you should do, obviously listen to radio, TV, newspapers for local weather to know if a heat wave is on the way. Drink sufficient water, and even as often as possible, even if you're not thirsty, right? Wear lightweight, loose-colored, porous cotton clothes, right? We use protective girdles, umbrella, shoes, chappals while going out. While traveling, carry water with you. When you work outside, use a hat or an umbrella, or use a damp cloth on your head, neck, face. Obviously, use ORS, drink buttermilk, lassi, lemon water, etc., which will help to rehydrate the body. Now, recognize the signs of heat strokes, heat flash, crampings, etc. If you feel faint or ill, see a doctor immediately. Or please, do care of your dogs. Right? Please put them on the shade and give them plenty of water to drink. Keep your home cool. Use curtains, shutters, or sunshade open windows at night. Use fans, damp clothing, and take bath in cold water frequently. Right? Provide cool drinking water. Caution workers to avoid direct sunlight. Issues, schedule strenuous jobs to cooler times of the day. Increase the frequency and length of rest break for outdoor activities. Pregnant women and workers should be given additional attention. Okay, so what should you not do? Obviously, do not leave children or pets in parked vehicle. Avoid going out in the sun between 12 to 3. Avoid wearing dark, heavy or tight clothing. Avoid strenuous activities outside the climate, right? Do not play cricket between 12 to 3. Avoid cooking hours during peak hours, right? Avoid alcohol, tea, coffee, or carbonated drinks to dehydrate the body, and obviously avoid high protein food, and do not eat stale food. Now we have the next topic, that is criminal law ill-equipped to deal with cases of rights, right? Right. So it says that general criminal law is provenly ill-equipped to deal with communal rights cases. The Delhi High Court suggested reforms, including possibility of entrusting investigative and prosecution process in which such cases to authorities other than the normal agencies of state. And this is Justice R.K. Gauba. He says after each event of communal rights, allegation of political influence have worked as the root cause of protection of those responsible. And this was the court observation, obviously came while upholding the conviction of 70 persons in connection with the 1984 Sikh riots in the capital Trilokpuri area. So this is the reason this is happening, right? So it said no meaningful thought spared till date to usher reforms in judicial process to effectively deal with the case of communal rights, which were engineered, and more often than not by those who are clout or influence of some kind. So therefore, this is the idea that he says that some kind of reform needs to be. So what the High Court suggested was this. So he says you should basically have an amendment to the Commission of Inquiry 1952 and Protection of Human Rights 1982 to entrust responsibility or investigation of communal rights to SITs, specially constituted under respective control. So that is the idea. And obviously, there was a strong case for utilizing evidence by press reports supported by photographic material or videographic footages and trials of criminal cases out of rights. So that is what this article is saying, and I think it's a wonderful idea. I think we can definitely add this in your answer in the IMPRINT answer writing challenge, which we'll be discussing later on. Then obviously a recap of the central bank, Urjit Patel's Parliamentary Standing Committee on Finance appearance, right? So Just to revise, first, the banking sector industry was over the hump on non-performing assets, which peaked in the first quarter, that is March 2018, that is 11% of advances, and both gross and net NPAs have registered a decline for the two consecutive quarters, that is June and September. Okay, so that's the good news, I think. So this is the good news that we got. Then there's a sharp fall in the slippage. The fresh NPAs added to the heaps also has declined. So this is obviously certainly good news, as indicates that skeletons are most probably out of the cupboard now. So there's no new bad loans left, right? Of course, there's still the owner's tax of resolving the bad loan shock, a little over 10 lakh crore, which is still there to be obviously taken care of. And the profitability of banks will continue to remain under stress, right? For the bad loans on their books, have to either remain in the books, or they have to take a haircut on the recoveries through the insolvency process. But then obviously we have another issue, which seems to be the next NPA, that is the Pradhan Mantri Mudra Yojana, which already basically has given loans up to 6.77 lakh. And obviously, the editorial says that this needs to have needs close monitoring, because this can easily become another NPA. The second important aspect of Mr. Patel deposit was a spirited defense of RBI's autonomy, right? Though he was careful not to say anything which would break the dent forged by the center and the central bank at its board meeting, he made three forceful points. So what are these three forceful points he made? That the RBI autonomy is important to protect depositors' interest. Number two, monetary policy has to be the inclusive domain of RBI, and its reserves are central to maintaining the AAA rating. So all these things, please note these. These are important. Right? These statements are probably aimed at nipping the bud at attempt to change the governance structure of the central bank. And obviously, Central is planning to push for board committees to assist the RBI in discharge of work. Right? And remember, the monetary policy is anyway the preserve of the MPC created by the RBI Act 2 years ago. And obviously, there are other equally important functions which the center may be attempting to control through the board. And obviously, this is becoming the gorilla in the room, right? Or the elephant in the room, as I say. Driving out, the RBI is not going to be an easy task. And there's always the Section 7 issue. So the problem is the issue of autonomy is not something that first emerged during this tenure, but has always been, happening. Okay. This is the editorial that we're supposed to discuss, in continuation with the previous article. And this talks about the same issue, that is RBI, the RBI board, and the government, right? So I'll briefly summarize this article, right? Because it kind of talks about the same topics again. So C. Rangarajan says, all's well that ends well. That's the thing that he says, right? All's well that ends well. And appears to be the most appropriate adage, right, in the case of the recent spat between RBI and the government. How agreement could be arrived before things could go public. So obviously this is satisfactory in some ways, right? But he basically now says that let's go into the earlier episodes when this has happened before. So the Section 7 of the RBI Act, in a sense, sets out the relationship between the government and the RBI, he says. This section gives the government the right to issue directions to the RBI in public interest, right? Strangely, the framers of the Act seem to have had in mind the frequent use of this section. As it says, the central government may from time to time give such directions, right, -- leaving that aside. It is a fact that government has not issued such a direction. Okay, even when we had the first issue in 1957 with Benagol Ram Rao, who resigned as the RBI governor on an issue he differed with the government, Jawaharlal Nehru wrote to him that you have laid stress on the autonomy of the Reserve Bank, and certainly it is autonomous, but it is also subject to the central government directions. So that's what the idea is. Even Nehru has said that, right? So monetary policy must be necessarily framed upon the larger policies which the government pursues. So definitely, the RBI has to act in accordance with what the government says, because at the end of the day, it is the people of India, not the autonomy of RBI, which matters. Then some years later, we had a similar issue when another governor, H.V.R. Iyengar, raised the issue of ad hoc treasury bills. And T.T. Krishnamacharya said, what to my mind is necessary is to ensure that government policy is formulated in this respect after full discussion with the RBI, and the later is kept informed of any changes that government may feel right to make before they are made, right? So idea that it is the obviously the government does have the right to do so. Then these episodes obviously set the the tone and the nature of the relationship between the RBI and the government, right? The RBI in 1985 decided to allow the banks the freedom to fix the interest rate on term deposits up to maturity of 1 year, and the government was consulted before the circular was issued, but later the government changed its mind. So this was a huge faux pas. And C. Rangarajan, and he says that I was a deputy governor at that time, and he was very obviously there was a big problem when he had to really rewrite the circular again, and basically write another one withdrawing the earlier one. So this was a huge issue, right? But obviously the recent changes in the monetary framework, setting up the MPC, giving full freedom to determine the policy, is obviously a giant step in giving the right. So the MPC obviously is the biggest example of the RBI getting autonomy, right? Because now the finance minister literally gets to note a decision along with others, right? So this is the case. Now the article then talks about Manmohan Singh, and when he was finance minister, how RBI autonomy was increased. So C. Rangarajan says that he approached him to do away with the issue of ad hoc treasury bills, right, which has effect of monetizing physical debt. So he basically, this was allowed by him, and this obviously there's a difference, but still, right, this put RBI on the road of on autonomy, but there's a distinction between autonomy as a monetary authority and autonomy as a regulator, right? So RBI, in the first case, autonomy has to be full, right, once the mandate is given. And the second, it's blurred because the mandate is broad and vague. So obviously, there are obviously issues, right? Like, the government can obviously issue Section 7 and issue instructions. So the Section 7 basically hangs like a sword of Damocles, right? So they can, you might think that, okay, this is the right thing to do, but the government can now come and say using Section 7 that, yes, you can't do so. The next thing C. Rangarajan discusses is RBI and the board. He says the issue is that, who's stronger, the RBI, governor, or the board? Okay, and he's mentioned two clauses. He says clause 2 says the business and affairs of the bank shall be entrusted to a central board of directors, which may exercise all powers and do all acts and things which may be exercised or done by the bank. So here it seems as if the board has the say. But clause 3, save as otherwise provided in the regulations made by the central board, the governor shall also have the powers of general superintendents and direction of affairs and business of the bank, and may exercise all powers and do all acts of things which may be exercised or done by the bank. Now, you're actually confused who's stronger, clause 3 or clause 2, right? But obviously, if you think clause 3 abridges the powers of the board, right, the right of, way of interpretation is that both, the board and the governor has concurrent powers in most matters. Right, and remember, the board has members nominated by the central government from various walks of life, and including the industry. And this creates a problem because there's a conflict of interest, right? Because the actions taken by the RBI could directly affect their interest, right? So obviously, the tradition is that the board has largely an advisor and is not taken that seriously, right? Because you can't let the chairman of the Tata board decide on NBFCs. He is the head of Tata Capital, as a pointed out much in many articles before as well, right? So he says two things need to be clarified. First is that if the board has not passed resolution on matters which are operating and policy oriented, the changes in bank rate in the past had the prior approval of the board. In fact, the weekly meeting of the RBI board, the first resolution used to be on the bank rate, but with the governor's concurrent power, the bank rate has been changed without going into the board. And then he says, secondly speaking, the board has the power to even discuss and pass resolutions, which should have been done. But given the nature of the board and the interest of the members, it's become difficult to let the board take binding decisions. So again, he mentions the fact that, these two things can't be done. Okay. Finally, he says, in the end note, right, that it is true that in the case of Federal Reserve System of the US, the board does take decisions with voting when necessary, but the nature of the board is very different, right? Section 7 is a mix of things. It gives powers to the board. Second, it gives powers to the governor, right? And the way the relationship between the board and governor has evolved over time, and the board has basically played a advisory role. Against this background, Sri Rangan says the governor, that the present governor, is giving advice to him. He says he must listen to the members' feel and sense of the board must fully reflect in his action, right? And the crux of the problem with the RBI, the board, the government must understand the limits to which they can push, and a spirit of accommodation must prevail between them. So all of them have to be together to, any kind of, RBI actually serving the people of India. Okay. Then the next article is, of J&K Bank becoming as a PSU, right? So what happened was, very interesting thing happened on the next day when the Kashmir Assembly was dissolved. The State Administrative Council, under his chairpersonship, approved a proposal of treating J&K Bank Limited as a public sector bank. And obviously what will happen is that it'll become accountable to state legislature. That's good, but there's no state legislature. And the finance department will be required to, place the bank's annual report before the assembly. All fine, but where is the assembly? The SAC also approved proposal from provisions of J&K Right to Information Act shall be applicable to bank. Okay, suddenly we have RTI being applicable to it, like other state-owned undertakings. It will have to follow, and now this is the most interesting thing, it will have to follow the guidelines of the Central Vigilance Commission. And I think that seems to be the major reason. Okay. Now the department has been asked to give directions to the bank to, follow directions of the SAC, but obviously the bank has yet to receive these directions. Okay. Now the question is, what is the reason for this move? Right? Why do you need to make it into a PSU? Basically, the idea is that this is a major reason. Extension of RTA Act and CVC is only aimed at promoting good governance and transparency in the functioning of the bank, right? And the idea is that we should have better corporate governance. That's the official reason given, right? What does the Reserve Bank of India consider J&K Bank to do? Obviously, it's an old private sector bank under the Section 22 of the Banking Regulation Act 1949. Okay, and RBI acts as a regulator, it supervises it. The CAG audits the books of the bank, right? And the RBI has been in communication with the CAG, stating that the bank, as the banking regulator, it is the RBI prerogative, not the CAG, and it may stop auditing the J&K Bank. That's also something which is happening. Okay, now the question is, what is unique about this bank? Okay, so it is the only bank in India where the state government holds a majority stake. In all public sector banks, it is, stake is held by the center. So as per as the Banking Companies Act, right, the central government holding, public sector cannot drop between 51%, right? And though, that the state government holds 59.3%, it is not considered to be a public sector bank. But this unique status obviously has to be taken in context of the Article 370, which gives autonomous status to the J&K Bank. And J&K Bank is the largest employer also, right? And it has a workforce of 9,000 plus people, right? It has decent profits also, right? It accounts for more than 50% of the profits of J&K, right? According to CAG report, and it is uninterrupted profit. So obviously it's a blue chip in some ways for J&K. And obviously till 2011, it was the sole banker to the state government, right? And in fact, it's akin to the RBI for other states and the center. And it was a lender of last resort. It provided an overdraft facility to the state when required. And obviously, it performed the role, of the commercial bank, a development financial institution as well, a financial service provider, as well as central bank. So, this is extremely, important for J&K, right? So, the question is whether it's legally tenable, because remember the problem with the J&K Bank, because it is Article 370 and always going to be issues. So according to provisions of the Banking Regulation Act applicable to J&K since 1956, J&K Bank is licensed as an old private sector bank and comes under regulatory purview and supervision of the RBI. and making it to a PSU and bringing it to the state legislature could be seen contribution to these provisions. So this is can be an issue, right? The idea is how have political parties reacted to this? That might be a question that you might be interested in. Okay, it's obviously what Mehbooba Mufti has said. It is a disturbing step to snatch every bit of our autonomy that our institutions have, right? And it's a disturbing development, right? And a caretaker administrator did not have the people's mandate to such mega decisions, far-reaching implications, right? Obviously, and Sajid Lone says that the best thing the government of the day can do is to get out of the way. Right. So this is obviously a big issue because J&K Bank is an emotional connect with the people as it existed before independence and has been a part of their lives for generations. Once it becomes a PSU, obviously it will have interference by the CVC, right, etc., and the RTA, etc. Right. And the timing of the move, as because obviously, how can a governor who is not even elected take such an important decision, right? Seems to be malified intentions, right? Especially from a neutral perspective. Okay, let's look at GS1. We look at a couple of questions, right? Just to have a look at the basic issue that is happening. So what happened was American national John Allen Chow was killed by the Sentinelese, right? And there have been various articles which talk about this. So what has happened is 44 violations have been by foreigners have taken in recent past in restricted areas of Andaman and Nicobar. And the restricted area permit, which allows people to visit certain locations without permission, may be reimposed in Andaman following the recent killing of the American by the inhabitants of a North Sentinel Island, which is obviously a protected tribe. Nobody's allowed to go there. And obviously, what will happen is now a National Commission of Scheduled Tribes delegation will visit Andaman and Nicobar on December to assess the situation after the killing of John Allen Chow by the Sentinelese a few weeks ago. Okay, now, right, the problem obviously is very simple, is that, the North Sentinel Island is a prohibited zone and he had gone there illegally. But the problem is that obviously at the end of the day, he's a human being and he does have the right to life. So, will a case being filed against him, with the Sentinelese or they not, right? If the case is filed against them, do you think that you can actually, get them to court, or you make them understand what is going to happen to them? So again, it's a total, jigsaw puzzle to be solved by the person. The editorial, has given us a few interesting things. It says that, the debate following the recent killing of the American national John Allen Chow by the Sentinelese have put, the light on the vulnerability of indigenous community, right? And that has lived for thousands of years with little contact with outsiders. And Sentinelese are more fortunate than the Jarawas because obviously the Andaman Trunk Road has cut into the heart of the Jarava Reserve and has disturbed their ecological environment, changed their lifestyle, dietary habits, and endangered them. And they mentioned the 4 tribes which are there, right, in the Andaman: the Great Andamanese, the Onge, the Jarava, and the Sentinelese. So this is important. And the 2 Mongoloid tribal communities in Nicobar are Shompen and Nicobaris. And except the Nicobaris, all other tribes have drastically reduced in the population. Okay. Then in the article, they have talked about 2 things mainly. So the idea is how to integrate tribals, or whether you should even basically just protect them. When India got independent, what happened was that there were 2 thoughts. The first thought was that whether these tribes should be left alone, right? So that was actually rejected on the basis that you can't think of these people as a museum to be looked at, etc., or to be studied. Number 2, whether you should integrate them. That should not be left to the outsiders, because obviously these people should themselves decide whether they want to be integrated to the mainstream or not. Okay, so this basically is the main issue. Now, so these 2 debates have been occurring, and this article talks about 2 other things. It talks about the Indigenous Tribal Population Convention of 1957, the International Tribal, obviously organization at that time insisted on integrationist approach, right? But then in '89, it recognized the aspirations of these people to exercise control over their own institutions, ways of life, and economic development, right? Uh, India normally actually follows the second spirit of the second one, right? Even before this was ever done, right? So that is what this article talks about. Let's now move to the next, article, that is maternity benefits. So this is Aditi Priya, and she's an MS student at Delhi School of Economics, right? So she's written an article that there's certain issues that has happened, right, under maternity benefit. That is the Pradhan Mantri Matru Vandana Yojana maternity benefit program, nearly 1 year after it was launched. Right now, what is happening is the benefits which were under the NFSA Act, that is 6,000 rupees per maternity pregnant women, has been reduced to 5,000. And second, they have been restricted to the first child. And third, they have been restricted to women above the age of 18. So now this kind of makes this is a faulty policy in some ways, because this application process is cumbersome, exclusionary. A separate form has to be filled, it has to be signed and submitted for each of the 3 installments, along with the applicant's mother child protection card, her Aadhaar card, her husband's Aadhaar card, details of bank account linked to the Aadhaar card number. Compulsory linking is also needed. Right? This basically has created a problem, and successive payments are only made if conditionalities are met. Okay, so what has happened is, they have a lot of people. She's given an example of Miss Devi, and she had to borrow, money to basically make ends meet with. So this obviously is a problem, and definitely something has to be done to make the Pradhan Mantri Matru Vandana Yojana more effective and efficient, because somehow all schemes which this government has done has come up with issues. There have been implementation problems. There's a need to think beyond the jam trinity to actually solve the problems of the scheme implementations. Okay, the next is occupational identities are merging with caste and religious identities in Madhya Pradesh, right? So Sajan Kumar, he's a political analyst associated with People's Pulse, and he's saying that the political mood of people in Madhya Pradesh is complex, right? And to understand voting behavior only through the prism of caste is an outdated method in this state now. And in fact, there have been occupational identities resonating across caste, religion, right? Now what has happened is the employing the categories of farmers, laborers, common employees, small businessmen, the urban service classes, and so on. And now we actually understand, if we basically think of, class as well as caste. So basically he says class plus caste. You need to look into both if you want to understand the, the voting behavior, right? So what he says is that they're shifting identities, right? Okay, so why does he say so? He says, in the wake of the mandalization of politics in the early 90s, right, when caste-based identity emerged as a dominant fault electoral line, Madhya Pradesh did not witness the replacement of traditional upper caste by OBCs, right? And it was Digvijay Singh who was basically elected the Congress chief minister instead of Subhash Yadav, and he occupied the position for 2 terms. It was a feeling of this denial, due share to the OBC, that the BJP basically projected Uma Bharti, a rebranded Hindutva leader, right? And the OBCs shifted to the BJP, right? Okay, so in the same significant, section of Dalits also shifted to the Bahujan Samajwadi Party from the 1990s to the 2008, and signifying the dominance of caste-based identity over other markers. However, other demonetization, other factors have happened, and now occupational identities are competing with caste and religious identities. And there's a sense of solidarity among occupational identity being formed, followed by the factors of rampant lower corruption, destruction of rural and agrarian economy, and livelihood elect on account of demonetization. And then there's been anger due to lower minimum support price, anger due to the implementation of schemes, that is Bhavantan Bhugtan Yojana, which has benefited intermediary VPRs. Then there's a problem of digital payments that cause delays in accounts, right? Money being created in accounts. right? So there's a consolidation of farmers belonging to the upper caste, right? OBC, STs, rather than their caste identity. So basically, there have been class groups now which are actually coming because they want schemes for their own class. That is instead of, because caste normally never really helps them in some ways. As a farmer, because obviously if you're not educated, there's no government employment for you. So what's the use of being from a certain caste? Okay, so what is required is that now we require a series of customized welfare measures, right? And the government responses have revealed a subtle attempt to privilege socio-cultural entities over occupational ones, right? And obviously there have been consistent political success of the BJP OBC Hindutva card from, Miss Bharti to the chief minister, that is, Shivraj Singh Chauhan in the last 15 years, right? So, but now we need customized welfare measures, particularly for those that fall below the BPL. And we should be seamlessly linked, fused with the caste come religious markers. Okay, so obviously there is rigorous implementation of the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, which was initially meant to cover the economically weaker section and lower income groups, but now has just been extended to the middle income group as well, right? So that is the thing. It further says there are also social surgical measures that favor socio-political identities over occupational ones. For instance, at a time where angers of farmers are emerging as a dominant issue, the state government, in coordination with the BJP, organized 6 OBC conferences in this election year, and it was inaugurated by the chief minister himself, right? And the chief minister himself labeled half the population of the state as OBCs rather than farmers. Right. Similarly, the popular Mukhyamantri Tirth Darshan Yojana, which was introduced, which provided one-time assistance to people above age of 60 and BPL, which wanted to go to pilgrimage, right, is also seen to be something like that. Then there is another trend of customized social behavior, right? So 1,000 rupee per month is deposited in the banks of women heads of 3 tribes, Saharia, Bega, and Baharia tribe, to combat malnutrition. Right, so those who have been left out of the scheme are naturally resented. So these 2 issues can obviously, because there's only BPL or only the women heads of the 3 tribes, because there are other tribes also in Madhya Pradesh. So he says, Sajjan Kumar says that he has found people to privilege their occupational identity over the caste and religious ones today. Corresponding, they're less likely to be swayed by cultural politics of descriptive caste identities with a religious framework, which is the present case, right? So we have a religious Tirth Yatra program, right? So that is the basic idea behind the caste identity and the religion identity. This shifting trend was captured in multiple field responses. For example, the Gujar farmers of Bandhana village in Chambal region are angry with the BJP government as farmers. They dismissed the demand of Gujar-led political body, the OBC SC/ST Ekta Manch, for 27% reservation for OBCs instead of the 14% one, despite they're saying that we're 50% of population, right? They say their articulation is that their suffering lies in being farmers rather than belonging to OBCs, and it is the anti-farmer policies of the BJP government which is creating the problem. Okay, so the shift towards occupational identities signifies the privilege or material politics over cultural politics, and that is what the significant result of this article is. And this is different from the caste politics of 70s, which marked differentiated classes as unconsolidated under the same occupational caste frames. Now, obviously, this might not be true in UP and Bihar, where class consciousness is still true, but in MP, definitely, there needs to be a class-based schemes in the manifesto. That's what Mr. Sajjan Kumar is saying. Okay, now obviously the questions from the IMPRINT answer writing challenge. So the first question is of mob violence. It's an old UPSC question. Mob violence is emerging as a serious law and order problem in India. By giving suitable examples, analyze the causes and consequences of such violence. Number 2, caste needs politics and politics needs caste. Explain, right? What are heat waves? What are its impacts? What are the do's and don'ts in the case of the heat wave, right? So I think you should be able to write question number 3, but you might need to read a bit about question number 1 and 2. Okay. right? Thank you for listening to us today, right? It was wonderful, right? Join a Telegram group for the PDF. Just search for Imprint IS on Telegram. Do like, comment, right? If you have any comments, how can we improve this? It would really help us. Thank you so much.